Egypt, land of pyramids and pharaohs. The eternal Nile River, a place so ancient that when Rome was just beginning, Egypt was already thousands of years old. But how did this legendary civilization actually happen? Let's take our time and explore. It all begins with the Nile River. Every single year, like clockwork, it floods the surrounding land. When the waters recede, they leave behind incredibly rich black soil, perfect for farming. Ding dong. Agriculture starts developing slowly. Wheat and barley grow abundantly. Small villages appear along the riverbanks. Out of this simple mud and water combination comes what will become the world's first great civilization. Around 3100 BCE, a significant moment arrives. A king named Narmer, also known as Menes, manages to unite Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt into one kingdom. Boom, the first pharaoh is born. Egypt becomes a unified country for the first time. Hieroglyphic writing appears on monuments. Pyramid construction gets planned carefully. The Old Kingdom period begins, and pyramids start rising from the desert. Pharaoh Khufu builds the Great Pyramid at Giza, which still stands today as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Egyptian society runs on a complex system. Farmers work the fields. Workers build monuments. Priests serve the gods. Scribes keep detailed records. All of them serve the pharaoh, who is viewed as a living god on earth. But even great civilizations face challenges. Eventually, famine strikes the land. Weak rulers take power. The system that seemed eternal begins to crumble. After a period of chaos, Egypt stabilizes during the Middle Kingdom. The country reunifies under strong leadership. Trade expands beyond Egypt's borders. Engineers build sophisticated canals and irrigation systems. Culture flourishes once again. Literature develops. Art becomes more refined and sophisticated. But then, knock knock, unexpected invaders arrive from the north. The Hyksos people roll into Egypt with revolutionary technology, horse-drawn chariots. Egypt learns new military tricks the hard way. For the first time, foreigners rule the land of the pharaohs. This humiliating experience teaches Egyptians important lessons about warfare and technology. Eventually, Egyptian resistance grows stronger. Ding dong, Egypt strikes back with determination. The new kingdom begins with military expansion and empire building. This becomes Egypt's true golden age, lasting several centuries. Legendary pharaohs ruled during this period. Hatshepsut breaks tradition as a female pharaoh, ruling peacefully for 22 years. She focuses on trade expeditions and massive temple construction projects. Akhenaten attempts a religious revolution, trying to establish monotheism with the worship of Aten. Though his experiment fails, it changes Egyptian art forever. Young Tutankhamun restores traditional religion after Akhenaten's death. He dies mysteriously at 19, leaving behind an intact tomb that would fascinate the world when discovered in 1922. Ramses II, known as Ramses the Great, rules for 67 years. He builds magnificent temples at Abu Simbel and expands Karnak and Luxor. The Valley of the Kings becomes the royal cemetery. Egypt reaches its cultural and political peak during this era. But even the mightiest empires eventually face decline. Egypt's power gradually fades as military costs become enormous. Building projects drain the treasury. Administrative corruption grows throughout the kingdom. Distant provinces become harder to control effectively. Foreign invaders begin arriving in waves. First come the Assyrians with superior iron weapons. Egyptian bronze technology cannot compete effectively. The capital gets sacked repeatedly. Pharaohs flee to southern strongholds. Next, the Persians conquer Egypt under Cambyses. Egypt becomes merely a Persian province, called a metropy. Heavy taxation burdens the population. Persian administrators suppress traditional Egyptian culture. Rebellions occur frequently but prove unsuccessful against Persian military might. Then Alexander the Great arrives in 332 BCE. Egyptians actually welcome him as a liberator from Persian rule. He founds Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast, which becomes a major Greek city and international trading center. After Alexander's death, his general Ptolemy establishes a Greek dynasty that rules Egypt for 3 centuries. The Ptolemies adopt pharaonic titles and traditional ceremonies, but Egypt becomes fundamentally Greek in character. Alexandria grows into the ancient world's greatest center of learning, featuring the famous library and museum. However, the Ptolemaic rulers prove increasingly weak. They practice sibling marriage, leading to genetic problems. Civil wars erupt frequently. Meanwhile, Rome watches Egypt's weakness with growing interest. Cleopatra, the 7th, the last pharaoh, attempts to preserve Egyptian independence by forming alliances with powerful Romans. She charms Julius Caesar first, then Mark Antony, but ultimately, these relationships fail to save Egypt from Roman conquest. In 30 BCE, Octavian defeats Mark Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium. Ding dong, Rome takes complete control of Egypt. After 3,000 years, the age of the pharaohs finally ends. Egypt becomes Rome's most valuable province, serving as the empire's primary grain supplier. Under Roman administration, ancient Egyptian culture slowly disappears. Hieroglyphic writing gets forgotten. Traditional temples are abandoned or converted. Christianity spreads throughout the land, and Coptic becomes the new Egyptian language. Desert monasteries flourish as Christian hermits seek spiritual enlightenment. For 6 centuries, Egypt remains under Roman and later Byzantine control. The old gods fade into memory. Pyramid maintenance stops completely. Ancient monuments begin their long decay. Then, in the 600 CE, everything changes again. Knock knock. Arab armies arrive, bringing Islam with them. The Byzantine defenders offer little resistance. Egypt becomes part of the rapidly expanding Islamic empire. New rulers establish Cairo as their capital. The Arabic language gradually replaces Coptic in daily life. Islam becomes the dominant religion, though Coptic Christians continue as a protected minority. Islamic culture transforms Egyptian society completely. The Fatimid dynasty builds extensively throughout Cairo. They found Al-Azhar Mosque in 970, which becomes a major center of Islamic learning. Scholars from across the Muslim world gather here to study religious law, theology, and philosophy. Later, the Ayyubids under Saladin make Egypt their base for fighting the Crusades. The famous Kurdish leader retakes Jerusalem and builds Cairo's impressive citadel for defense. The Mamluks, originally slave soldiers, eventually seize power and rule Egypt as sultans. Despite their military origins, they become great patrons of art and architecture. Magnificent mosques rise throughout Cairo. Islamic geometric patterns and beautiful calligraphy decorate religious buildings. But the Ottomans grow increasingly powerful. In 1517, Sultan Selim conquers Egypt and makes it an Ottoman province. For 3 centuries, Egypt is governed from distant Istanbul. Local Mamluk beys maintain some influence, but real power rests with Ottoman administrators. During this long period, Egypt stagnates economically and culturally. Trade routes shift as Europeans discover ocean passages to Asia. The population declines significantly. Agriculture suffers from neglect and overtaxation. Then, Napoleon arrives dramatically in 1798. His invasion brings European scholars who carefully study ancient Egyptian monuments. Most importantly, they discover the Rosetta Stone, which provides the key to deciphering hieroglyphic writing. When Jean-François Champollion cracks the code in 1822, the ancient world suddenly becomes readable again. Muhammad Ali, an Albanian officer, seizes power in 1805 and begins modernizing Egypt. He reforms the military along European lines. Cotton cultivation expands dramatically. Educational missions send Egyptian students to study in Europe. Industrial development begins slowly. The Suez Canal, completed in 1869, connects the Mediterranean and Red Sea. This engineering marvel becomes the shortest route to India and Asia. European interest in Egypt increases dramatically as the canal's strategic importance becomes clear. However, ambitious modernization projects create enormous debt, leading to European financial control. Growing debt forces Egypt to accept European financial advisors. British influence increases steadily. In 1882, a nationalist revolt led by Colonel Arabi provides the excuse for British military intervention. Egypt becomes a British protectorate in all but name. Egyptian nationalism grows stronger under foreign occupation. Leaders like Mustafa Kemal and Saad Zaghloul demand complete independence. The 1919 revolution, though suppressed, forces Britain to grant limited independence in 1922. However, British bases remain, and London retains significant influence. King Fuad and later King Farouk rule the new monarchy, but British power continues behind the scenes. World War II brings German threats and reinforces British military presence. Egyptian resentment grows steadily. The Free Officers Movement, led by Gamal Abdel Nasser, overthrows the monarchy in 1952. Egypt becomes a republic with ambitious plans for modernization. Nasser nationalizes the Suez Canal in 1956, triggering a crisis when Britain, France, and Israel attack. Though Egypt suffers militarily, Nasser wins politically and becomes a third world hero. Ding dong, wars with Israel dominate the following decades. The 1967 Six-Day War proves catastrophic, with Egypt losing the Sinai Peninsula. However, the 1973 October War restores some Egyptian pride despite mixed military results. Anwar Sadat shocks the world by visiting Jerusalem in 1977. The Camp David Accords lead to peace with Israel. In 1979, Egypt regains Sinai but faces Arab isolation. Modern Egypt continues struggling with authoritarian rule, economic challenges, and political instability. The 2011 Arab Spring briefly promises democracy, but military rule returns under President Sisi. Through everything, the pyramids endure and Egyptian culture survives. By